It's time for Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
It's story time. This is Wretched Radio, not one but two stories. Both true, both radically different. It is the 19th century. The location, London, England. The players, Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers, and the unemployed Karl Marx. These two men were contemporaries. Did you know that? No doubt, both aware of the other's existence, and yet two radically different messages and two radically different dispositions. Courtesy of Larry Alex Taunton, sharing a compare and contrast between these two men that is a reminder. The Christian path, Christian verities versus secular ideologies, including critical race theory. Any sort of ideologies that are tainted by Karl Marx are so radically different, and they attain a radically different outcome. The achievement of each worldview is startlingly different. Let's go back to the 19th century, shall we? Karl Marx, born in 1818, died in 1883. Spurgeon, born in 1834, died in 1892. This is a quote from Karl Marx. Communism abolishes eternal truths. Isn't that something? He stated that in the Communist Manifesto, 1848. It abolishes all religion and all morality instead of constituting them on a new basis. Whoa, did you know that was the agenda of what we are seeing in our culture today? Abolishing everything. Why? Because the current issue that we are calling social justice issues at its core has a morphed form of Karl Marx's worldview, a tearing down of all ideologies, all cultural norms, because they were all created by bad people who are oppressors by nature, and therefore the systems, if there is going to be equality, must be torn down. And that includes morality. Karl Marx wanted to transform everything. A quote from Karl Marx: abolish the family. Now, that's a tricky phrase, but what he's trying to say is he doesn't want to focus on the family in a good kind of way. He wants to abolish it. Why? Because it is a structure that is normative, and it's also good. And any idea that Karl Marx had, I haven't read anything where it's like, hey, that makes sense. Everything is opposite of God. Because he was a sour, angry man. Abolish the family, he wrote. The bourgeois family will vanish. As a matter of course, when its complement vanishes, and both will vanish with the vanishing of capital. Who are the bourgeois? They were the oppressors of our day. The bourgeois were the rich people then. It's slightly morphed, not just the rich people, but the oppressors, whether they've got money or not, because these days, the number one money demographic in our culture, not white males, it's Asian people. That is why today you see people that are being put into oppressor groups, not just financial groups, but the people who have the power. Back then, it was deemed the bourgeois. Today, it is deemed white European straight Christian males. Back to Karl Marx, the bourgeois claptrap about the family and education, about the hallowed correlation of parent and child, becomes all the more disgusting, the more by the action of modern industry. So he was seeing the Industrial Revolution. He hated what was happening. Now, we need to remember that history happens in time. What was he seeing? Think Charles Dickens. He was seeing child labor laws non-existent, kids being abused, long work hours, black lung, people dying in coal mines. He saw the black smoke billowing out of the steam stacks of London. And he determined it's all bad. It needs to go. But it wasn't just what was being built visibly. It was some of the invisible building of families and morality and values. And Karl Marx, wanted it all gone. All family ties among the proletarians are torn asunder and their children transformed into simple articles of commerce and instruments of labor. Therefore, we need to trash everything. Now, commentary from this particular article. Lazy and like socialists of any era, Karl Marx did not mind accepting monetary handouts from wealthy capitalists while criticizing the means by which they had acquired the wealth. Black Lives Matter. Sorry. A little glitch right there. Isn't it funny that people who are receiving the benefits of capitalism love to criticize the very hand that feeds them? And that started with Karl Marx. Back to this particular article, Marx was allergic to work. It seems he never held a steady job. Even as he extolled the evils of capitalist industry, there is no evidence he ever visited a factory at any point in his miserable life.
That's interesting.
Don't believe this guy. Believe Karl Marx's mother, who bitterly complained that she wished that her son would, quote, accumulate capital instead of just writing about it. Wow. Isn't that interesting insight into Karl Marx? He was a lazy, angry, bitter critic of anything that was good. Why? And this is the key. Because he was godless. So ask yourself a question, and we will see the answer unfold itself. Where did, historically, Marxism, communism take root?
Where?
It wasn't in Great Britain at the time, was it? Why? We'll find out in just a bit. Marx divided the world into two camps, the revolution and its enemies. Why did he divide people into sects? Because he didn't want unity. Why? Because there's strength in unity. There's goodness that is produced from unity. Why? Because God is united. So it's good, and Karl Marx was against anything God, and so he would divide. But not just for the sake of division, because he didn't like unity per se. He wanted division because that is what breeds animosity. And what do you get with people who are warring against one another? The destruction of society, which is exactly what Karl Marx sought, which is exactly what we are seeing today. This has something to do with ethnic issues in our time. You can't deny that, but it's a Gumby action figure that really is just a slight morphing of Marxism. That is why what you are seeing in the streets, the fighting that is going on, there is an underlying agenda. Racism, I believe, is the Trojan horse. Inside is Karl Marx. Look at a political party on the left. It begins with Dem and ends with Ocrat. What are they seeking? Anything that is sniffy and whiffy to you these days? It has a string attached, and it's connected to Karl Marx from the 19th century. He divided the world into two camps, the revolution and its enemies. These were simply identified as those who agreed with the dogmatic Prussian and those who did not. So if you're on Marx's side, you're good. If you weren't in any way, shape, or form on any one of his particular issues, you're against him. You're not with him, but, I kind of No, you're either for or agin Karl Marx.
So one thing I don't understand, I mean, you do a simple search of Karl Marx and let's just say Black Lives Matter and the similarities between the two. Why do they try to distance themselves from saying Marxism?
Because they know that it's not popular yet. That's all. It's not popular yet. And there are too many examples in history now that reveal it hasn't worked one time. It can't. It's anti-God. It's not that these things don't work because they're bad ideas. They can't work because they're not God's ideas. And even a godless culture that trips into godly ideologies will do better. Why? Because that's the way reality works, the way that God has designed it. So even if a godless marriage, somebody who does not believe in Jesus Christ gets married, but they believe in fidelity, they believe in forgiving one another, serving one another, then that marriage will actually flourish. But they don't have Jesus in the center. That's right. Doesn't flourish as much. It can't. But when it is applying godly principles, it will work better. Why? Because reality revolves around God. And Karl Marx's view of reality was anti-God. He was awful. The division that he sought was to wreck culture, not because he was merely opposed to capitalist societies, because he was not interested, frankly, in my opinion, in a culture war. This was a dogmatic war. This is a war between godly values, Christian values, and godless ideologies. And that sets our stage for our second player in this 19th century British drama. Enter the Prince of Preachers, Charles Haddon Spurgeon. Was he aware of Karl Marx? Uh-huh. Did he talk about socialism? You bet he did. Next on Wretched Radio.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is